Okay, welcome to History with Mr. Williams. So what I'm going to do in this video is we're going to look at the importance question that comes up on paper 2. For you guys it will be in your American West paper, so it'll actually be question 3 on that paper, and you will have 2 of these importance questions to answer, each of them being 8 marks, so obviously that'll be 16 marks in total to answer those questions. But it's basically going to be 4 marks for your knowledge and 4 marks for your explanation, which is going to be shown in how we obviously structure this going forward. So in terms of how to actually answer this question, well, it's always going to be set out, explain the importance of something to something. So what I've done here is used something to something to mean x to y. So I apologise that this is going to sound slightly like it's in maths, but I promise you it will make sense. So explain the importance of something to something. Now whenever we're answering this, we have to think, hang on, what does the word explain mean? Now the word explain simply means what and why. So everyone rejoice, because this therefore means you have to be writing in P paragraph styles. So first of all, you always have to come in and say why it was important. Okay, so X was extremely important to Y because of, and give a reason as to why it was important. Trying to convince the examiner. So this isn't a discussion question, you are convincing the examiner that it was the most important thing in the world and it was so crucial. Then we need to answer and apply our what and our why. So our next bit is our what, our example. What were X and Y? How did they interact? How did they work together? What do you know? This is basically you giving some facts, reciting that knowledge. Then finally, we need to give our why part, which is the final part of our explain, which is in itself the explanation. So this is where we say why the above facts we've shown show that it was important. So you're actually answering the questions. This is why it was so important. This is why that is so important to that thing. This is why X is important to Y. However, please be aware you will have to do 2 P paragraphs for each of these questions. Okay, so what we're going to do here is just see how we can actually bring this to life through an example. Now I'm going to give you this technique, and I do encourage you to use this all the time in how you answer these questions, because the best way to argue why something is important is to explain what it would be like without that thing existing. To explain something's importance, well, you've got to say why it was important. This is what would happen if it did not exist. So I'm going to use the example of oxygen to Mr. Williams. So explain the importance of oxygen to Mr. Williams. Now, whilst this has got nothing to do with the American West, hopefully it will demonstrate to you the method I'm going to use here. So I'm going to try and think of one reason as to why oxygen is important to me. What point am I going to give? Well, my point is going to be, well, oxygen is very important to Mr. Williams because of its use in allowing him to survive. That's one reason as to why it was important. However, that is not me answering the question yet. I need to explain. So first of all, I need to give my what. Simply, what is oxygen? How does it work? So again, I'm going to use my A-level knowledge here from biology, and I'm going to pretend I know what I'm talking about. For example, oxygen is a colourless, odourless reactive gas, the chemical element of atomic number 8 and the life-supporting component of the air. It makes up 20.95% of the air and is inhaled in amongst this air by the lungs, which then diffuses the oxygen into the circulatory system of the individual, where it is pumped around the body to individual cells. When oxygen reaches the cells, it is involved in aerobic respiration, powering the cells in their function. That's a load of wibbly wobbly whoop, and basically what I've said is what oxygen is and what it does. But that is still not answered the question. I need to do my final part of explaining and link why therefore it's important to me. So this is where I'm going to bring in my why. So my why is going to be, this shows that oxygen is important to Mr. Williams as he too is an individual and he relies upon the above method of cells respiring using aerobic respiration to survive. Again, I'm going to now go back to explain importance because of what it would be like without it. Without oxygen, Mr. Williams would not have the correct chemicals within his bloodstream and cells to power the cells in their functions. This would result in the cells shutting down and ultimately dying. With his cells dying, the entity, Mr. Williams, would also die. Therefore, oxygen is very important for Mr. Williams because without it, he would simply die. However, with it, it allows him to survive and flourish as an entity on this planet and to make these videos. How lucky for us all. So again, what I've done there is simply said, well, why is it important? I've told you in my evidence what it is, but in my explanation I've argued why it was so important, because simply without it I would die. So again, let's actually apply this to an American West question, and hopefully we'll see how I'm literally going to use the same formula all the way throughout, but I'm just going to change the facts around. So this means you go into the exam with the same formula, just change the facts around. So if we were to look at the question of explain the importance of the buffalo to the Plains Indians, well, I need to think of two reasons as to why the buffalo were important. So my first point I'm going to argue is very similar to my oxygen one, is because buffalo were extremely important and a vital part of Plains Indian society because of their role in ensuring the Plains Indian survival. Simple. This is why it was important, because they needed the buffalo to survive. Again, I'm going to have to argue what that is. For example, one detail is that the Plains Indians not only used the meat for food, but also every part of the animal could be used. For instance, bones were shaped into knives, which could then be used to help slaughter the animal. The stomach lining could be dried and used to carry water and food. The dung was used for fuel, for cooking and bringing warmth. If I was the examiner, I would be ticking away there going, wow, okay, we got some facts here. This is what they know. However, again, we now still need to link it back to Plains Indians and explain the above facts. Remember, when you explain, you may repeat yourself slightly, but it's linking it back to the question. And that's what I'm going to attempt to do here, again, by saying, because without the buffalo, what would happen? So therefore, I'm going to say, this shows the buffalo were extremely important to Plains Indians, because without these items, the Plains Indians would not be able to live on the Great Plains and cope with the extreme weather conditions they would have faced throughout the year. It was a vital part of their ability to gain shelter, heat, food and clothing. So again, what I've done is I've used that technique of explaining why something was important, because without it, this is what would happen. But again, I've done that while still giving my facts in my example above, in my evidence. So again, that's one paragraph. I've stated my point, given my facts, my what, and explained why. Now let's try another one. So another reason that I'm going to give is that actually the buffalo were also important because they underpin the Plains Indians' nomadic lifestyle. So point being, buffalo were extremely important and a vital part of Plains Indian society because of their role in causing the nomadic lifestyle of the Plains Indians. Now I'm going to tell the examiner, well, hang on, what do I mean by nomadic lifestyle? What is this? What's happening here? My facts. For example, in their quest to hunt buffalo in order to survive, the Plains Indian tribes would continuously move around the plains following the buffalo herds in their migration patterns. This would mean their whole lifestyle was continuously on the move. This was known as a nomadic lifestyle. They would live out of their teepees and would travel on horseback to track and hunt the buffalo. They would travel as a whole band of families together. So again, I've said exactly what I mean. What is it when I say buffalo and the nomadic lifestyle? And again, I need to link it back to the question. Well, why does that show the buffalo were important? Again, I'm going to use the same technique. Well, because without the buffalo, would we have had this nomadic lifestyle? No, let's argue it. So, what I'm going to say is, this shows the buffalo were extremely important to Plains Indians because the buffalo were the fundamental cause of their nomadic lifestyle. If the Plains Indians did not need to hunt the buffalo and could instead rely upon other food sources such as growing crops, this would have led to them living in a stationary, non-nomadic lifestyle. However, due to the lack of other food sources, this led to the necessity of hunting the buffalo by following them in their migration patterns. It was this necessity to follow the buffalo herds that directly caused the Plains Indians to live this nomadic lifestyle, thus showing the importance of the buffalo to the Plains Indians and their way of life. And again, I've tried to convince the examiner again, look, the buffalo were so important, they're amazing, listen, they were crucial. Here's my other reason, because of their nomadic lifestyle and how it caused that. For example, I've told the examiner what that lifestyle is and explain why the buffalo were important in that. So again, for this question, you need 2 P paragraphs for each question. You have about 12 minutes to argue that, so you may not get in as many facts or as much depth of explanation as I've given here, but as long as you follow that structure, P, E, E. And remember, your explanation, you can always rely upon the argument that without it, this would not have happened. Without it, this change would not have occurred. Without it, their lifestyle would not have existed in this way. Importance is crucial. Argue it. Okay, thank you. That's History with Mr. Williams.